God, my Elohim. Listen to the voice of my God. One who walks in you, I make me love. Listen to the voice of my God, I believe. Listen to the voice of my God, my Elohim. Listen to the voice of my God. Young who walks to you, I make him love. Lift up the light of your face upon us. Yahuwah, to you, Yahuwah, I lift up my voice. I bring delight in the praise of your name. Yahuwah, you are my life. You are my life. Yahuwah, you are my life. You are my life. Listen to the voice of my God, I believe. Listen to the voice of my God, I am over. Listen to the voice of my God, Yahuwah, to you I make to lift up the light of my face upon us. Yahuwah, you Yahuwah, I lift up my voice. I bring delight in the praise of your name. Yahuwah, you are my life. You are my life. Yahuwah, you are my life. You are my life. Yahuwah, you are my life. You are my life. Yahuwah, you are my life.
Hear, O Israel, Yahuwah, our Elohim. Yahuwah is one, and you shall love Yahuwah, your Elohim, with all your heart, and with all your being, and with all your might. And these words which I am commanding you today shall be in your heart, and you shall impress them upon your children, and shall speak of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up, and shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. And you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. And the second one is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Netzarim channel. Hope everybody had a wonderful week. And We're continuing in Unleavened Bread this week, so I thought we'd just go ahead and round it off with a lesson here and study, continuing on the appointed times of Yahuwah. And we're going to touch these. We do these every year, annually as they come up. We generally speak of them and go over them as we learn more each year about the appointed times, and we can share that. And it's a great refresher for all of us. And it's really good for new people just starting to learn about the appointed times. And so, but this time I'm going to approach these appointed times just at a slightly different angle. Nothing too outlandish, but just wanting to broaden our horizons, increase our knowledge of Yahuwah here, and just get a little bit deeper than we've gone before. And should be a fun, exciting study as we progress through this evening. Had a great week. I've been feeling better, and so that's always a good thing. And we're having a lot of thunderstorms right now, so hopefully we stay online and we don't get booted. If we do get booted, it's because my electricity went out, just so you know in advance. And then we'll probably, I don't know, it depends on how quickly it would come back, whether or not I've finished the program or not. But we'll see. It looks like it's starting to go past us now, and so we may be okay. Yahuwah's will be done. I talked a little bit last week about Passover, and we touched that at a little bit different angle as well than we have before. And this isn't to trip people up, it's just to expand our knowledge in Yahuwah, to broaden our horizons so we see a clearer picture of what's going on here. And so Passover, Last Supper came and went. Passover came and went. We began the first day of Unleavened Bread, which was a Shabbat, or a high Shabbat, as some people call it. Now we're toward the end of the festival of Unleavened Bread, and it will end at sundown on the second day of the week coming up here. And then the weekly Shabbat, which is coming up right now. And then we go into Bikurim on the first day, which is the day after Bikurim, or the waving of the sheaf offering, or the resurrection. And we begin to count down to Shabuath, counting 7 weeks, or on the 50th day, it would be Shabuath. Okay, so that's where we're at. We have a few more days left celebrating Unleavened Bread, the Festival of Unleavened Bread. Okay, so since we're still in the middle of it, we're going to talk about it. And we should be focused in on it, and we should be celebrating it and thinking about it and studying about it anyway, all week long, really. So we all should tune in, pay close attention, and so that we can help others to understand Yahuwah's 7 appointed times more easily, without too much trouble. I notice a lot of people have trouble explaining the 7 appointed times to new people, and it usually leaves them looking something like this. Okay. And then the next year they're asking the same question. So they didn't get any understanding from who was teaching it to them. But it's not always the teacher's fault, because sometimes it's on you. Sometimes you need to push that stone out of your way, and you need to study on your own and learn about these things yourself. That's the best way, because you retain it. You're the one doing the studying and the research and the reading. You retain it much, much better than just listen to somebody else teach it to you. So if you're going on your second year, your third year, maybe your fifth year, your seventh year into the Nazarene understanding of scriptures, the way, and you're still confused about the 7 appointed times, I would suggest that you're not doing enough studying on your own. Maybe nobody's fault but your own, And it's very important to know these things. This ain't something we should just blow off. Yeah, whatever, And I know that they represent the redemption plan of Yahushua, or the shadow of things to come for the body of Yahushua. But that's about all I really know about it. And, I don't think I need to do anything or know any more than that. Well, you're wrong. Okay, so these are commands of Yahuwah. And every time you read through them, it says that these things are everlasting or forever, will be done throughout all your generations forever. And so in that light, they become extremely important. And I'm sure Yahuwah would be very happy if you knew what you were talking about with his 7 appointed times. I think that would put a smile on his face. I think he would appreciate your time and effort in learning what his appointed times were all about. And if you're like me, all I want to do is please Yahuwah. And so I think this is a very important thing that we need to do, very important task, and be able to understand the 7 appointed times as best we can anyway. All right, so that's what we're going to be talking about here this evening. And let me say hello to a few people, and we'll get started. Let me put in my greeting to all of you, beloved of Yahuwah, people out there. Shabbat Shalom, beloved of Yahuwah. Ooh, what a title that is. Are you one of his beloved? I hope so. Okay, let me say hi to a few people and we'll get going here. Miss Sandra Brunston, glad you're here, sister. Number 1, as always. You amaze me. I don't know how you beat me on here, Sandra, but you actually beat me on here. You must have the Ruach on your side or something. Phil Dickey, glad you're here, brother. Peggy Russell, glad you're here, sister. Levi Davis, glad you're here, brother. Lou White, glad you're here, brother. Phyllis White, glad you're here, sister. Kate Connell, glad you're here, sister. Sharon C., glad you're here, sister. And Ike is with you, so glad you're here, Ike. Brother Ike. Mr. 3 Jobs, glad you're here, John. In a little while, glad you are here, Sister Yami. And let me take a wild and crazy stab at it. Just a crazy, wild guess that your husband's also watching. So glad you're here. And welcome, welcome, welcome. And Mr. Raul, shall I dare say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Shabbat! XX, glad you're here. Brother IZSDS from El Paso, man, glad you're here, brother. Brother William Kennedy, glad you're here. Sister Shelley Kennedy, glad you're here. Sister Juanita Phillips, glad you're here. All right. Okay. All righty. We'll get started. We're past our threshold of beginning. We're in 27 viewers that we know of. There's always more than we know of. They just don't, they're just incognito mode. But usually I like to get started at 25, and that's a good target. And then they usually trickle in pretty good from there. I think last week we went up in the 40s or something with participants. So that was pretty good. And then for the week, we have 437 views on last week's Passover study, which I thought was really great that many people were interested in Passover. So we're growing little by little, folks, very subtly. As Yahuwah gives us the growth, we're up to 833 subscribers or something or other like that now since we began this Nazarene assembly. And so our target was 1,000, and we're starting to see that it's coming into sight. We only need about 167 more subscribers to reach that goal of 1,000. And then from there, it's whatever it's all Yahuwah anyway. I accept whatever Yahuwah sends. I don't really sweat over that. I never have. I never will. But if you want to work the harvest, it's a great opportunity to share this site with other folks or bring them over to your house to watch it with you during the live broadcast and things like that. And so that we can grow the kingdom, the reign of Yahuwah grows with every immersed being that comes on here and immerses themselves in the name of Yahusha. The body of Yahusha grows, and people start getting credit for that fruit. So don't waste the opportunity. All right. It's here. Take advantage of it. Some of us have a hard time getting out and talking to other people and things like that. So if you're on here a lot, this is a great opportunity for you to work the harvest and collect fruit for the kingdom of Yahuwah. All righty. So we'll go ahead and get started here on this evening's study here somewhere. I'm not real sure where to get moving on this, but we'll do it nonetheless. Okay, so now during this remaining time we have here, and I mean, if we include Passover, we got 2 more things happening. But if we include Passover, there's 3. So we'll just say 3, including Passover, which has already went past. It's already passed over, right? No pun intended. So these 3 events, like we explained last week, are most often blended into one event, especially by the Israelites. And they just call everything Passat or Passover. They're not all Passover. Okay, somebody mistaken last week for they thought I said that unleavened bread is Passover, and that's not what I was saying. I said they call it Passover. It's not Passover, but they call it Passover. They actually call all 3 events Passover. But there is a crucial difference between the 3. And this is what we'll be exploring in tonight's study. So during the Passover time frame, which we're not going to spend a lot of time on here, but there are, and when I say Passover time frame, I'm talking about the entire 9 days now. Not just the week of unleavened bread, but including Passover and Bikurim. And so or 8 to 9 days, however it falls out through the calendar. So the time frame, and during this time frame, if you will, there are three distinct and crucial differences that represent three unique spiritual states or conditions relating to our ruach, our inner man, our spirit. And this is where we're going to go off and examine this from just a little slightly different angle this evening. Okay, so first of all, Passover represents the rebirth, the repentance, the cleansing, the rebirth. We could say deliverance or salvation if we want to help bring other people on board in this understanding. But mainly for us Netzarim, this would be the salvation in as the blood covering protected the firstborn from the dead. See what I'm saying? So repentance and rebirth, salvation or deliverance from death. Because of the power in the blood of the Lamb, okay? So Passover represents salvation to bring these other people with less understanding in with us on this journey tonight. So Netzarim, bear with me for their sake. We are saved from the wrath of Elohim by belief in the blood of the Passover lamb. Not Easter ham, but Passover lamb. John 1:29 clearly says, "Behold, the Lamb of Elohim, who takes away the sins of the world." So Yahusha was slain on Passover as the perfect fulfillment of the Lamb that delivered the Israelites on the very first Passover, when Yahuwah passed over the houses that had the lintel and their doorpost painted with blood of the Lamb. He passed over those houses, and so the firstborn within them houses were safe. They did not die. And when I see the blood, I will pass over. Exodus 12:13 states, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you. Okay, so then the second event then within this time frame is unleavened bread. And that's what we're in right now. So unleavened bread, which a lot of people also call matzah, or the bread of affliction, represents, and here we're going to go off in a little different direction here, so bear with me, set-apartness. So the matzah is flat because it is devoid of yeast, or shemes, which represents wickedness, pride, ego, and that which causes us to be puffed up or to think more highly of ourselves than we ought to. I know we're used to saying that it represents sin, okay? But like I said, we're going to look at this just a little bit. We're going to expand our horizons this evening. So bear with me. I know it. We teach that it represents sin, okay? I didn't forget. I'm just approaching this at a different angle, and I want you all to come with me on this journey. This is going to be a spiritual journey, and I hope it touches some people. I think it will. Matter of fact, I think Yahuwah is letting me know that it's definitely, this study is going to reach out there and touch quite a few of you. So stick with it. So, puffed up, egomaniacs, pride, wickedness. thinking more highly of yourself than you ought to, or we ought to. 1 Corinthians 5, 6 through 7 says, your boasting is not good. Don't you know that a little yeast leavens the whole batch of dough? Get rid of the old yeast so that you may be a new unleavened batch, as you really are. For Mashiach, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed. Pretty heavy duty right there. So the matzah is closely related to a Hebrew word pronounced shamutz, which means sour. So yeast is a souring agent. Likewise, sin causes bitterness to grow within our inner being. And 1 Corinthians 5:8 says, therefore, let us keep the festival, not with the old bread leavened with malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread, the matzah, of sincerity and truth. So the week of unleavened bread, therefore, represents sanctification or set-apartness, accomplished through affliction, trials, and testing, and the purging of pride and ego in order to teach us humility and obedience by the things we suffer in our wilderness experiences. Here's a new one for you. I'll explain that here just shortly, a little bit deeper. In the meantime, Deuteronomy 8:2 says, and you shall remember that Yahuwah your Elohim led you all the way these 40 years in the wilderness to humble you and test you, to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. So your time in the wilderness, which is what the week of unleavened bread represents spiritually here, is a test to see if you will humble yourself, put everything on Yahuwah, and so he can know your heart, whether you will keep his commandments or not through the wandering of the wilderness. So number 3, I'm going to go through this deeper. Don't worry. We're going to get real deep into this. So number 3 event then in this timeline, if you will, is Bikurim. Bikurim in Hebrew, first fruits is what is most known as. So first fruits, also Bikurim, called Bikurim in Hebrew, which occurs the day after the first day of unleavened bread, between the first day and the last day of unleavened bread, which are both high Shabbats, by the way. So it falls in there somewhere. Ideally, it would be the next day after the 7th day. That don't happen too often. So this Bikurim, or first fruits, or the waving of the barley sheaf, represents resurrection. So just as the barley is offered up to Yahuwah as the first fruits after winter, or the first crop taken after winter, so Yahusha was also raised from the dead on the festival, or the feast of first fruits, Bikurim. 1 Corinthians 15:20 says, "But now the Mashiach is risen from the dead and has become the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep." So from these three distinct elements within Passover, or events within Passover, we can understand, or at least we should be able to begin to understand, that between the events of, we'll say salvation, because I want to keep people in this, and the resurrection is a process of set-apartness that we have to live through, or sanctification, if you will, if that helps you to understand. So we have Passover, unleavened bread, and first fruits, which is the resurrection. So we have the Passover, which is salvation. We have unleavened bread, which is a set-apartness, or representing us wandering in the wilderness. And then first fruits, which is the resurrection. So between them events, Passover or salvation, and first fruits of the resurrection, is this process of set-apartness, which represents us wandering in the wilderness of our life. So when the Israelites were delivered or brought out of Mitzrayim, they also had to go through a set-apartness process, a set-apart process, or sanctification process, which took them through the wilderness on their way to the promised land. Okay? And even though the Israelites entered into a covenant with Yahuwah in the wilderness and came to even understand their identity as Yahuwah's treasured possessions there in the wilderness, sometimes, and most of the time, they responded negatively. They responded to hardship and barrenness of the wilderness with great discouragement. In the wilderness, they also lost heart. They lost hope. They longed to go back to Mitzrayim. They grumbled, they murmured, and complained. And for that reason, all of them perished except for two: Joshua and Caleb, who followed Yahuwah wholeheartedly and kept the belief in his promise. The bodies of the other Israelites laid scattered across that vast wilderness from one end to the other as they perished. So during our walk with Yahuwah, we're all going to enter into this wandering in the wilderness in our life. Okay? And even Yahusha HaMashiach spent time in the wilderness. Perhaps it doesn't really say, but perhaps it was in the Judean desert or the Negev desert, somewhere there in Israel. The Ruach HaKodesh led him there to wander in the wilderness and be tempted by the devil. Let's look at Matthew 4 real quick. So Matthew 4. Let's get a look at Yahuwah's time spent in the wilderness, Yahusha's time spent in the wilderness, if you will. So go to Matthew 4. I'm in the BYNV, by the way, if you're wondering what I'm reading out of. Matthew 4, 1 through 11. Then Yahusha was led up by the Ruach into the wilderness to be tried by the devil. And after having fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. So here we see that we can see the same example here in Luke 4 as well, 1 through 13. But here it's saying that Yahusha ate nothing. He fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, and he was hungry. Well, in my opinion, and I've said this before, I mean, I know some of you have heard me say this, but I've never really explained myself. But I will tonight, because I think it matters tonight. That I think Yahusha not only fasted didn't eat anything for 40 days and 40 nights. I don't think he drank anything either. And I know I've had some responses before about this saying, oh, Brother Mark, I can understand where he could have lived 40 days and 40 nights without eating, but he surely could not have lived 40 days and 40 nights without drinking anything. Mark, he would have died. And that's why he doesn't mention it. Well, I think otherwise. And the reason I do is because of what's written in Exodus 34:28. So let's take a look at that real quick. Exodus 34:28. Those who are following along with me. Exodus 34:28 says, and he, speaking of Moshe now, this is Moshe. And he was there with Yahuwah 40 days and 40 nights, and he did not eat bread, and he did not drink water. And he wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 words, the 10 Debarim. So here we see that Moshe was able to survive with not eating nor drinking for 40 days and 40 nights. So why would we think that Yahusha could not do that? Back in here in Matthew 4. That's why I say Yahusha didn't drink either. He didn't eat and he didn't drink, in my opinion. Because of what's written in Exodus 34:28. If a mere mortal, Moshe could have done it, I have no doubt in my mind that Yahusha could have done it. And the trier came and said to him, if you are the son of Elohim, order that these stones become bread. But he answering said, it has been written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of Yahuwah. Then the devil took him up into the set-apart city and set him on the edge of the set-apart place and said to him, if you are the son of Elohim, throw yourself down. For it has been written, he shall command his messenger concerning you, and in their hands they shall bear you up so that you do not dash your feet against a stone. And Yahusha said to him, it has also been written, you shall not test Yahuwah your Elohim. Again, the devil took him up on a very high mountain and showed him all the reigns of the world and their esteem, and said to him, all these I shall give you if you fall down and worship me. And then Yahusha said to him, go, Satan, for it has been written, you shall worship Yahuwah your Elohim, and him alone you shall serve. Then the devil left him, and see, the messengers came and attended to him. Now, I've heard people say, that can't be true. There's no mountain high enough in Israel that you could get up on and see all the kingdoms of the world. Who says that he was put on a physical mountain? Maybe he was in a dimensional, different dimension up on some high mountain. He could see all the kingdoms of the earth. We don't know what mountain that was. It could have been a physical, literal somewhere. He could have put him on Everest, whatever. But he could also put him in a spiritual mountain that's much higher to a parallel dimension or something. We don't know. This spiritual creature here. This is spiritual people, man. They can do things that we don't even know about. So don't try to limit Yahuwah to literal meanings. That's a bad thing to do. But anyways, the point of this is if Yahusha had to walk in the wilderness in his walk, why would we think that we would not have to? During times of testing and trial and all these other things going on in the wilderness, we can expect it. So expect it. From the time that you were delivered by the blood of the Lamb to your resurrection, expect to be walking in the wilderness of your life. It's like the Israelites were doing. It was a type or a foreshadow of our life. So this desert that Yahushua was in when he was tempted in the wilderness by the devil was not an easy place to live. Whether it was the Judean desert or the Negev desert, don't really matter. It was not an easy place to live, okay? And it's not even today. Even with air conditioning, these people have a hard time living there. But these desert lands over there is a land full of snakes and scorpions, a place of great danger. And yet the wilderness is not and was not a punishment. Some think it was a punishment. Really, it was not. But it is and was a necessary stage in our spiritual journey in life. So when you enter into a wilderness, don't look at it as being punished. I know we all want to do that. Yahuwah, why are you punishing me? Why are you tormenting me? Why are you torturing me? What are you getting out of hurting me, making me suffer with this disease, with this illness, with this financial problems, with this death, whatever? And what are you getting out of it? But it's the wandering in the wilderness of our life is not punishment, folks. We can't look at it like it's punishment. We have to see it as a necessary stage in our spiritual journey through life. It's often Yahuwah who leads us into the wilderness experience in order to humble us, to test us, to refine our belief, and to teach us perseverance and endurance. The Song of Solomon, Song of Songs, chapter 8:5, says it rather beautifully. If we come out of it alive, if we come out of our wilderness journey of life alive, okay, if we come out of it alive, if we make it through it, we do so we do so by leaning on our beloved deliverer. Instead of relying on our own strength or limited sufficiencies, we learn to lean on Yahusha. And that's how we come out of this trial, this journey in the wilderness alive. That's powerful stuff. And I hope you understood what I just said. The wilderness, we can look at it as being our spiritual university, our place of training, learning, where we learn to trust in Yahuwah and depend upon Yahuwah. And only Yahuwah knows how long the lesson will take. It could be a week, it could be a couple months, it could be a year or a few years. Only Yahuwah knows how long we need to wander in the wilderness. So in other words, folks, for us, for the believers in this space of our life, this vast space between salvation and the resurrection, lies the wilderness journey for all of us. It's a dry and thirsty land where water is scarce. That is where Yahuwah will set us apart. That is where we are sanctified, folks. And since it is very easy to lose heart in the wilderness or during this set apart process, and believe me, I know firsthand. Oh, how I know. Our response to the trials and the challenges will determine how well we make it through to the resurrection. Discouragement during our wilderness journey is an especially powerful weapon for the enemy to use against us because of its enfeebling or demoralizing effect on us. Enfeebling effect meaning sickness, weakness, or weakened state, being sick, being fatigued, hurting, pain, depressed. It's demoralizing effect. That's what discouragement does. Once we've become discouraged, Satan uses it. It's an especially powerful weapon for the enemy to use against you. And you're really dragging, man, forcing yourself to live day by day, preferring to die. You're very discouraged in this wilderness. I'm sure a lot of us can relate to that. So this is not so with, this don't really hold true with hatred, jealousy, and fear, and other negative states that may cause us to act foolishly or to fight or to run away. With these emotional attacks, at least we act. Discouragement, on the other hand, hurts us the most because it ultimately zaps the energy right out of us. We become chronically fatigued, causing us to sit down, pity ourselves, and do nothing about it. We just want to die. We would prefer just to die. Curse the day we were born, like Job did. Discouragement causes us to give in to the temptation of the enemy, of Satan, who whispers, just give up. Just give up. Stop trying. It's not worth it. You feel lousy. Just lay down and die. And curse Yahuwah and die. Sound familiar? Probably read that in the book of Job, haven't you? Proverbs 13:12 says, hopelessness is a very dangerous state of mind, very dangerous state of being. In fact, Scripture tells us that hope deferred makes the heart sick. And again, bear with me as I use verbiage to keep beginners with us. This is an important study this evening. I need everyone to stick with us. So I'm going to use words that I would not normally use to keep them with us. So bear with me. When all hope is lost, bad things happen. This wandering through the wilderness for the Israelites was a time of hopelessness. They were wandering the nations without Yahuwah's blessing to protect them. And if they were living as though they were living in a valley of dried up bones. In our own valleys of dried up dreams and desires, when all hope seems lost, we wonder if everything has been done in vain in our life. If the sun will ever shine again in our grieving hearts. Israel asked these same questions as they wandered through the wilderness. The dry bones, which represents the whole house of Israel, say in Ezekiel 37:11 says, our bones are dried up and our hope is lost. We are cut off. Despair. Sometimes we can feel that we have been cut off from life itself and all hope. But so often when we feel that darkness is closing in on us, at that very moment is when Yahuwah is doing his greatest work in our life. Likewise, it is when Israel's hope in itself is completely destroyed that Yahuwah's promise of restoration comes forth as a breath of life. In Ezekiel 37:13 and 14, it says, behold, I will open your graves and cause you to come up out of your graves, O my people, and I will bring you into the land of Israel. And you shall know that I am Yahuwah, and I will put my Ruach in you, and you shall live. Now, Ruach in Hebrew, when referring to Yahuwah, can be spirit. But it's also the same word that we see here in Ezekiel that is translated breath. And so, if you will, I will cause my breath to enter into you, and you shall live, the breath of life. Okay. Or in a spiritual understanding of that, we could say he immerses us with the Ruach HaKodesh and gives us eternal life. So in the Nazarene writings, Yahusha miraculously foreshadows the fulfillment of this word. And Yahusha, when Yahusha arrived 4 days after his friend Lazarus or Eleazar had died and been placed in the tomb, everyone's expectation or hope in Lazarus being raised from the dead was completely lost. And so the question comes to mind then, why did Yahusha wait for 4 days to resurrect Lazarus where there was no hope? And because at the time there was Yehudite tradition that says that if a person's spirit always hovers around its physical body for 3 days. But after this time period, then the spirit will leave the physical body. Therefore, the Yehuda people who witnessed Lazarus' death were convinced on the fourth day that the situation was completely lost and totally without any hope whatsoever. Even the spirit of the deceased had departed in their minds. But then Yahusha shows up and calls out to Lazarus or Alazar and says, "Come out." And Alazar came up out of his grave and he lived. One thing, however, needed to be done before Alazar could come out of the tomb. The stone had to be rolled away. Somebody had to do it, and Yahusha wasn't going to be the one to do that. Though he could have very easily rolled it away himself, or even commanded the heavy stone to move, and who would have obeyed him, he called upon the people to participate in this miracle. Yahusha said in John 11:39, "Take away the stone." So why do you suppose that was? Why? Well, perhaps he wanted to teach them that we are not to be completely passive and expect Elohim to do everything for us. Or perhaps there was a stone standing between us and our miracle. And he was teaching us that we had to remove that stone in order to receive our miracle. Perhaps all that is needed is to draw upon our childlike belief and strengthen within us to take away the stone under Yah's direction. Then perhaps we'll witness Yahuwah perform a resurrection in our own life. Maybe he'll bring us back from the brink of death after we remove the stone between us and our miracle. Hallelujah. Like these people around Lazarus who thought Yahusha came way too late. Too late. It's been 4 days. Sometimes we find ourselves in an utterly hopeless situation where it's been so tempting to give in to despair and depression. Yehukanan 11:25 says, "This is exactly when we should be reaching out for a miracle to the one who said, 'I am the resurrection and the life.'" John 11:25. Before our situation became hopeless, we may have been counting on Yahuwah to show up to perform a miracle for us. Maybe we were waiting on a miracle, expecting a miracle. But it seems that maybe he did a no-show. He forgot about us. And the relationship or the business or the whatever we were hoping for died. We gave up hope. At this point is when deep disappointment sets in. And we began to ask these type of questions. Where was Yahuwah in this? And then we may ask, where was his power when I needed him the most? Why didn't he help me? So we could sit there looking at that stone, crying and thinking it's just too heavy or too hard to move. Or we can just move away the obstacle, let Yahuwah work in our life, and see miracles come forth, burst forth. May we all hear the voice of our good shepherd and obey what he tells us to do, to see that miracles happen, even if it doesn't make sense or seems impossible. Yahusha's Talmudim also knew hopelessness and felt hopeless and utter despair. At Passover, after Yahushua's death on the stake, it looked like all hope was lost and that the forces of evil had triumphed. His Talmudim wandered about in confusion and sorrow. They scattered and hid themselves. They had hoped that this finally was the real deal. After so many false prophets and false messiahs, they believed that he was truly the Mashiach who would redeem Israel from the Roman oppression and restore the kingdom of Israel. But after Yahushua's execution, two people were traveling to a village 7 miles from Jerusalem. They walked together, were talking and reasoning about the event with quite sad demeanors. But then Yahushua came near and walked with them along the road. In Luke 24:16, it says, still their eyes were restrained and they did not recognize him. So Yahushua appeared to these two people who had certain expectations of how Elohim was going to work things out. But even though things didn't happen the way they thought it should, this was Yahuwah's greatest triumph over darkness, his resurrection. In their darkest hour, in their utter hopelessness, they couldn't see that hope was walking right alongside of them. For Yahushua is our living hope. Everybody go to 1 Peter 1. First Peter 1, 3 and 4 says, blessed by the Elohim and follower of our Master Yahushua Mashiach, who according to his great compassion has caused us to be begotten from above, to a living expectation, that's hope, through the resurrection of Yahushua Mashiach from the dead, to an inheritance incorruptible and undefiled and unfading, having been kept in the Shemayim for you, who are protected by the power of Elohim through belief for a deliverance ready to be revealed in the last time, in which you exult, even though for a little while, if need be, you have been grieved by manifold trials, in order that the proving of your belief, much more precious than gold that perishes and proven by fire, might be found in to result in praise and respect and esteem at the revelation of Yahushua Mashiach, whom having not seen, you love, in whom you exalt with unspeakable and esteemed joy, yet not seen, but believing, obtaining the goal of your belief, deliverance of lives. So there you go. So it's just like people, when we've experienced some type of disappointment or setback, to lose hope and forget all about Yahushua being our living hope. We all just got to find somebody to talk to about this, about our disappointments and our setbacks. We try to reason the thing out to somehow make sense out of something that just doesn't make sense. This often only causes more sorrow and more discouragement. When things don't work out the way we had hoped they would, it could be that redemption is right there with us, walking alongside us, like Yahushua was walking alongside those two that day. Sometimes that living hope is right under our noses, but we don't perceive it because it comes in a form we didn't quite expect. In our most darkest hours, we must remember that Yahuwah never leaves us, for he safeguards our being, our spirit, as we travel through the wilderness where we are set apart or sanctified. There in our wilderness, our ultimate hope is in Yahusha and his resurrection. Yirmiyahu, or Jeremiah 14:8 says, "You who are the hope of Yisrael, its deliverer in times of distress." Hebrews 10. Look at Hebrews 10. Hebrews 10:16 through 23 says, "This is the covenant that I shall make with them after those days, says Yahuwah. Given my laws into their hearts, and in their minds I shall write them. And their sins and their lawlessnesses I shall remember no more. Now where there is forgiveness of these, there is no longer a slaughter offering for sin. So brothers, having boldness to enter into the set-apart place by the blood of Yahusha, by a new and living way, which he instituted for us through the veil, that is his flesh. And having a high priest over the house of Yahuwah, let us draw near with a true heart and completeness of belief, having our hearts sprinkled from a wicked conscience and our bodies washed with clean water. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without yielding, for he who promised is trustworthy." All right. So there's the new spiritual insight into what's happening here. Okay. So keep all that in mind now as we walk through this, as we enter into and refer to scriptures and what we just learned, and let's try to apply it as we study through scriptures together now. Remember, Passover, salvation. Bikurim, or first fruits, resurrection. Between there is our wilderness journey, or unleavened bread. All right. Let's see if we can apply that as we study together in scriptures now. So let's look at look at Exodus 34:18. Exodus 34:18. It says, "Guard the festival of unleavened bread. For 7 yamim you eat unleavened bread, as I commanded you, in the appointed time of the month of Abib, because in the month of Abib you came out from Mitzrayim." So the Passover, the salvation, the deliverance from Egypt happened during the Passover, and then they go into the unleavened bread, the journey in the wilderness. Lots of tests and trials and things that happened to them through them 40 years. We can't look at this and say, "Oh well, once I've repented and went through the rebirth process and entered into the new covenant, that I gotta walk through the wilderness for 40 days, 40 years, because that's what the Israelites do." No one knows the time that Yahuwah is going to leave you in that wilderness. But you could die in the wilderness, depending on how stubborn you are, depending on how much, where he finds your heart at, and what he, how you respond to these things, and how quickly you're obedient to him. So he could bring you out of there quickly, leave you in there for a long time. You could even die in there. It just depends on you. But you're going to go through the wilderness. There will be testing and trial. So prepare yourself. And it's not easy. It's not going to be an easy journey. Even Job had a hard time with it. He didn't. Why you leave me? Did you do this to me? I don't even want to live anymore. I just want to die. He even cursed the day he was born. Job did. He cursed the day I was born, man. Throw me into the pit, cover me up, man. I'm done. It's just, I can't do this. But yet he still suffered. And then he was in nothing but pain. He couldn't even sleep. He couldn't stand up. He couldn't sit down. He couldn't lay down. He didn't know what to do. Everything he did brought pain. And so he just sat there in ashes, naked in ashes, because clothes even hurt his body to put on clothes. And his wife and his friends talked wrongly to him about Yahuwah. His wife told him just to curse Yahuwah and die. His life was over. And he even felt it was. He was very discouraged and gave up all hope, didn't he? And what happened? Finally, Yahuwah brought him out of that wilderness and gave him a wonderful life, better than what he had. So it's not, you can't sit there and say, oh, why me? Why am I going through this? Why are you torturing me? Do you hate me? What did I do? These are things that men do in their weakness, and I'm sure we all talk like that. But what we must remember, one big, huge thing, is that Yahuwah never left the Israelites in the wilderness, and he's not going to leave us either. He's going to be there. We just need to turn to him and ask him, don't leave me here. I understand the refining process. I understand the tests and the trials and to see if I'm going to love you and be obedient to you. And I get all that. But don't leave me here. Get me out of this place, Yahuwah. You promised that I would have life and life more abundantly in this world and the world to come. I claim that promise. Get me out of here. Though I suffer all day long for your sake, get me out of here. So we have to remember that he's always there, no matter how bad things get. Don't give up hope. We have to endure. We have to fight our way through that wilderness, man, and conquer it. And you're going to go through it. All believers will go through that. Look at Leviticus 23. This go 4 through 22. These are the appointed times of Yahuwah, set apart Mikra, which you are to proclaim at their appointed times. In the first month, on the 14th yom of the month, between the evenings, is the Passover to Yahuwah. That's prep day. And on the 15th yom of this month is the festival of unleavened bread to Yahuwah. 7 yamim you eat unleavened bread. This would be a Shabbat. On the first yom you have a Kadesh Mikra. You do no servile work, and you shall bring an offering made by fire to Yahuwah for 7 yamim. On the 7th yom is a Kadesh Mikra. You do no servile work. So this is unleavened bread. And Yahuwah spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, and you shall say to them, when you come into the land which I give you, and shall reap the harvest, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest. And he shall wave the sheaf before Yahuwah for your acceptance. On the morrow after the Shabbat, the priest waves it. And on that yom, when you wave the sheaf, you shall prepare a male lamb, a year old, a perfect one, as a burnt offering to Yahuwah, and its grain offering, 2/10 of an alpha of fine flour mixed with oil, an offering made by fire to Yahuwah, a sweet fragrance, and its drink offering, 1/4 of a hin of wine. And you do not eat bread or roasted grain or fresh grain until the same yom that you have brought an offering to your Elohim. A law forever throughout your generations and all your dwellings. See that law forever, man. Forever means forever, especially when Yahuwah says it, because he's eternal. He ain't joking around. He says forever, it's forever. And from the morrow after the Shabbat, from the yom that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, you shall count for yourself 7 complete Shabbats. Until the morrow after the 7th Shabbat, you count 50 yamim. Then you shall bring a new grain offering to Yahuwah. So this shows us that the Bikurim, or first fruits, always comes on the first day of the week. It has to, so you can properly count those 7 Shabbats. Bring from the dwelling for a wave offering 2 loaves of bread of 2/10 of an alpha to fine flour. They are baked with leaven. First fruits to Yahuwah. And besides the bread, you shall bring 7 lambs a year old, perfect ones, and 1 young bull and 2 rams. This is all talking about Bikurim. They are a burnt offering to Yahuwah, with their grain offering and their drink offerings, an offering made by fire for a sweet fragrance to Yahuwah. And you shall offer 1 male goat as a sin offering, and 2 male lambs as a year old as a peace offering. And the priest shall wave them besides the bread of the first fruits as a wave offering before Yahuwah. Besides the 2 lambs, they are set apart to Yahuwah for the priest. And on the same yom, you shall proclaim a Kadesh Mikra for you. You do no servile work on it, a law forever, and all your dwelling throughout your generations. So it's also a command or a law forever. And when you reap the harvest of your land, do not completely reap the corners of your field when you reap, and do not gather any gleaning from your harvest. Leave them for the poor and for the stranger. I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. So there we go. We see the command, the law of Passover, unleavened bread, and Bikurim, and the count to, and the Festival of Weeks, the count to Shabuath as laws forever. So does that mean they're important? Yeah. They're important. Look at Numbers 28. And in the first month of the 14th Yom is the Passover Yahuwah, and the 15th Yom of this month is a festival. For 7 Yamim, unleavened bread is eaten. Okay, Passover's always been and always will be on the 14th day of the first month of Bib. And unleavened bread has always been and always will be on the 15th Yom of the first month of Bib. It doesn't shift around, man. It doesn't float. And Yahusha, when he walked the earth in the flesh, he fulfilled the Passover, unleavened bread, and Bikurim precisely on these dates on the Hebrew calendar. He wasn't confused. Okay. He wasn't going by Enoch's calendar or any other calendar. He knew exactly when the appointed time was that he was supposed to fulfill Yahuwah's appointed times. And he did so precisely and accurately. I would be very cautious to suggest otherwise for anybody. I don't care how nutty you are about all these other calendars and stuff. I would be very cautious to say Yahusha was confused or was going by another calendar. You're taking a high risk, in my opinion, because this is a law forever. And these dates are set in stone, man. You can't change these dates. Ain't no calendar made by any man is going to change these dates that Yahuwah recorded in the Shemayim. On the first Yom is a set-apart mikra. You do no servile work. And you shall bring near an offering made by fire as a burnt offering to Yahuwah. 2 young bulls and 1 ram and 7 lambs a year old. Perfect ones they are for you. And their grain offering, fine flour mixed with oil. Prepare 3/10 of an ephah for a bull and 2/10 for a ram. Prepare 1/10 of an ephah for each of the 7 lambs, and 1 goat as a sin offering to make atonement for you. Prepare these besides the burnt offering of the morning, which is for a continual burnt offering. There was a continual burnt offering. That is what was continual. According to these, you are to prepare the food of the offering made by fire daily for 7 yamim as a sweet fragrance to Yahuwah. It is prepared besides the continual burnt offering and its drink offering. And on the 7th yam, you have a kadesh mikra. You do no suva work. And on the yam of the first fruits, when you bring a new grain offering to Yahuwah at your festival of weeks, you have a kadesh mikra. You do no servile work. And you shall bring near a burnt offering as a sweet fragrance to Yahuwah. 2 young bulls, 1 ram, 7 lambs a year old, with their grain offerings of fine flour mixed with oil. 3/10 of an ephah for each bull, 2/10 for 1 ram, 1/10 for each of the 7 lambs, 1 male goat to make atonement for you. Perfect ones, they are for you. Perfect ones, they are for you. Prepare them with their drink offerings besides the continual burnt offering with its grain offering. So there you go. There's confirmation. Comes straight from the mouth of Yahuwah. All right. Okay, let's move over into the Nazarene writings here. Go to John, Yehukanan 19:25. So Yehukanan 19:25 says, and by the stake of Yahusha stood his mother and his mother's sister, Miriam, Yasha of Clopha, and Miriam from Magdala. And so, remember, we were talking about the 2 people that was walking down the road, and he appeared to them. He was right there with them, but they didn't know him. Okay, so this would have been his uncle and his aunt. A lot of different denominations like to tell you that there was 2 of his Talmudim walking together down the road talking about his execution, but it wasn't. It was his uncle and his aunt. Matter of fact, his mother was Yahusha's mother's sister. Miriam was married to Clophah. So it was his aunt, and so this Alophah would have been his uncle through marriage. Okay, just so you know, because that's what they teach, and it wasn't two of his Talmudim walking together. It was his uncle and aunt, which would have known him probably even more. It was even closer to him than his Talmudim, because they would have known him from a little kid. I'm sure they all got together every time they went to the festivals. So look at Yehukanan 20. Let's get a look at Yehukanan 20. And on the first day of the week, Miriam from Magdala came early to the tomb. So this would be after Yahusha died. He was put in the tomb. While it was still dark, and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran and came to Shimon, Kepha, and to the other people whom Yahusha loved. They have taken the master out of the tomb, and we do not know where they laid him. Then Kepha and the other people went out, and they were going to the tomb, and the two were running together. But the other Talmud outran Kepha and came to the tomb first. And stooping down, he saw the linen wrappings lying, but he did not go in. So they had him wrapped up with like 1 to 2 inch wide wrappings, like a mummy, and they had it pasted on, and then a scarf wrapped around his head. Okay, so he wasn't wrapped in a shroud of Turin like they claim. That's falsehood. He was wrapped up like a mummy, like the Egyptians did. You've seen proof of that as they've uncovered mummies in Egypt. That's where the Israelites picked up the habit of mummifying their dead and putting them in tombs. Was when they were during their 430 years of captivity in Mitzrayim. They learned that burial technique of the Mitzrites. So they saw the linen wrappings lying on the floor, and the cloth which had been on his head not lying with the linen wrappings, but folded up. So the other people who came to the tomb first also went, and she saw and believed. So he believed that the body was missing. That's what he believed. For they did not yet know the scripture that he had to rise again from the dead. So they didn't know that he was going to be resurrected. So he believed that the body was missing, just like Miriam came and reported to them that somebody had stolen the body. So he went and saw it was gone. So he believed somebody had taken the body. Okay. That's another misconception. Some denominations teach that. Therefore, the Talmudim went away again by themselves. But Miriam was standing outside the tomb weeping. Then as she wept, she stood down to the tomb and saw 2 messengers in white sitting, one at the head and the other at the feet, where the body of Yahusha had been laid. And they said to her, Asha, why do you weep? And she said, because they took away my master and do not know where they laid him. And having said this, she turned around and saw Yahusha standing, but she did not know that it was Yahusha. Yahusha said to her, Asha, why do you weep? Whom do you seek? Thinking he was a gardener, she said to him, Sir, if you have carried him away, say to me where you put him, and I shall take him away. And Yahusha said to her, Miriam. She turned and said to him, Rabboni, which means instructor or teacher. Yahusha said to her, do not touch me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, and to my Elohim and your Elohim. So here now, what's happened is he was killed, on the stake. He was a Passover lamb. Then he was buried 3 days and 3 nights, right, in the tomb, and then he resurrected his own body. And so now at this point, you notice way back here in the beginning where it said the first day of the week would have been what the Christians call, Easter morning, okay, on the sun's day of worship, right? Okay, but this on the first day of the week, and it's still dark. And so his resurrection happened before daybreak, which would have been a fourth day. Okay, fourth daylight day. Okay, because he said he'd be in the tomb 3 days and 3 nights, and then he would resurrect himself on the third Yamam, not the fourth, but the third, which means he had to resurrect himself on the Shabbat before it got dark. Maybe an hour, maybe a half hour, whatever time frame it was. It was before night came and the next day started, the first day started, because if it wasn't, then that would have been the beginning of the fourth Yamam or the fourth night, however you want to say it. And that would have went against what Yahuwah said. Yahusha said, he said, I'll raise my body on the third day. So just say he raised himself at 6 o'clock. He was resurrected inside that tomb. And it's still a little bit daylight out. We'll just say it got completely dark at 7. Just easy math. So he resurrected on Shabbat before the fourth day would have begun, or the fourth night. So what did he do? Would he just sit in the tomb? Did he leave the tomb? What did he do? It really doesn't say what he did. But what it does say is Miriam went down there before it became daylight on the fourth day and talked to him. And he said that he had not ascended to the Father yet. That it does say. Okay. So we know that when he was resurrected, he didn't go straight up into the Shemayim, present himself as the wave sheaf offering to Yahuwah. He didn't do it right away. He stood there and talked to Miriam for a while. First of all, so what's going on here? Okay, so he was the Passover lamb, the unleavened bread representing his body, was without sin. Okay, and then he was resurrected, Bikurim. And so this is what is represented within these summer or spring appointed times, was what he did to redeem his people. Okay, so Passover, laid in the tomb, his unleavened bread, his body was without sin, it was pierced and bruised and without sin. And then Bikurim, he was the first fruit of the dead to Yahuwah. So he went up into the Shemayim, waved himself, sprinkled his blood in front of Yahuwah as first fruits of the dead, which Bikurim represents the resurrection. See that? So that's pretty much what's going on here. Then it goes on through here and says, go tell my brothers, say to them that I'm ascending to my Father and your Father, and to my Elohim and your Elohim. So later on in another writing, we find out that Miriam grabbed a hold of his feet when she came out, but this is saying she told her not to touch him. And so what comes to my mind is the control that Yahuwah has over time, okay, and events. So what could he have done? Well, he came out and she saw him. Obviously, he said he had not ascended yet. So maybe by the time that she ran back, or by the time she ran up there and grabbed his feet when she saw him, he could have, within that split second, went up and ascended, became the wave offering, sprinkled his blood, and then came back down. By the time Miriam got to run over and held his feet, he could have stopped time. He could have froze everything. made time stand still. He could have done all kinds of stuff for this to be true and not a contradiction. So we can't underestimate the power of Yahuwah. Okay, we can't say, well, that makes no sense. I only gave him a few seconds before she touched him. We'll get to it. You'll see what I'm talking about. But he can do anything. Nothing's impossible with Yahuwah. We can't shortcut Yahuwah and what he's able to do. Just because it doesn't tell us doesn't mean it didn't happen that way. See that? We'll get into it in a different book. You'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, so anyway, when therefore it was evening on that day, the first day of the week, the same day, and when the doors were shut where the pupils met for fear of the Yehudim, Yahusha came and stood in their midst and said to them, peace to you. And having said this, he showed them his hands and his side. The pupils, so therefore he must have been in his fleshly body. He had transformed back into flesh. The pupils therefore rejoiced when they saw the master. Then Yahusha said to them again, peace to you, as the Father has sent me, I also send you. And having said this, he breathed on them and said to them, receive the Kadesh Ruach. Okay, so you can go ahead and finish reading all that if you want. I'm going to move on from there to Luke 9. So Luke 9:57-62 says, and it came to be as they journeyed on the way that someone said to him, Master, I shall follow you wherever you go. And Yahusha said to him, the foxes have holes and the birds of the skies nest, but the Son of Adam has nowhere to lay his head. And he said to another, follow me. But he said, Master, let me first go and bury my father. And Yahusha said to him, let the dead bury their own dead, but you go and announce the reign of Yahuwah. And another also said, Master, I shall follow you, but let me first say goodbye to those in my house. But Yahusha said to him, no one having put his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the reign of Yahuwah. Okay, so this is kind of like your wilderness journey, okay? And so when it's time for you to walk your journey, you go through the wilderness, your wilderness journey, you're not supposed to keep looking back. You're not supposed to, worry about, doing all these other things other than going through your tests and trials correctly, being obedient to Yahuwah and concentrating on Yahuwah and what's happening in your life in that wilderness. Trying to find your way out of that wilderness, basically. If you look back, or if you go back, okay, you are going to wander in that wilderness for a long, long time. I mean, you may die there. Keep going back and forth, you probably just die in the wilderness like Israel did. Only 2 people made it out of that wilderness because they didn't look back. Look at Matthew 10. You see what I'm talking about. Look at Matthew 10. 32. Matthew 10:32 says, everyone therefore who shall confess me before men, him I shall also confess before my Father who is in the Shemaim. But whoever shall deny me before men, him I shall also deny before my Father who is in the Shemaim. Do not think that I have come to bring peace on Eretz. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to bring division, a man against his father, a daughter against his mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's enemies are those of his own household. He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. So this is kind of telling you, man, you just can't keep going back and forth in and out of the world during your walk in the wilderness. So what you're doing is you're going back to Egypt. And if you're doing it because of your children or mother or father or anybody, okay, then you want to be with them more than you do with Yahuwah. And so, therefore, you'll probably end up wandering in the wilderness until you die, because you continue to go back and forth, in and out of the world. You've been called out of the world. Like the children of Israel were called out of Egypt. You're to stay out. Don't even look back. Don't even think about going back. Don't even think about the things that you used to do back there. Full steam ahead. Keep your eyes pointed forward, looking forward like you have blinders on. Get yourself out of the wilderness so that you can achieve the resurrection. Can you achieve the resurrection in this world? You better believe you can through your rebirth. You follow in the true pattern of Mashiach and you're resurrected, coming up out of that water. A rebirth, you're a spiritual child now. Of course you can be resurrected in this life. You'll be resurrected into eternity, or changed in the blink of an eye at the second coming of Yahushua. In the meantime, you can reach that, get out of the wilderness and get into the promised land, which is the reign of Yahuwah. You can gain the resurrection now. But you got to get out of the wilderness journey first before you die there. If you're messing around and you're not listening to Yahuwah and not understanding what he's talking about, you're going to die in the wilderness, just like the children of Israel did. Only two come out there, Caleb and Joshua. So you have the repentance, the rebirth, the calling out. You have your salvation through the water and the blood, the cleansing through the belief in the blood of the Lamb of Yahuwah, the power in the blood of his sacrificed offering, which was one-time permanent deal. You don't have to see it being done every day. It's all you have to do is believe he did it. You only have to believe that he sacrificed himself and shed his blood for the forgiveness of your sins. That's the belief that you must have, not in the belief of his existence. Although you have to believe in that Yahuwah exists before you can believe anything else. So then you got your wilderness journey, which is represented by the unleavened bread. That's your set apart journey. That's when he sets you apart. That's your sanctification, if you will. And then you finally come out of your wilderness journey to the promised land, you achieve the resurrection, represented by the Bikurim, the sheaf wave, the waving of the sheaf. And you can obtain it now. But you cannot obtain that until you come out of the wilderness. You must find your way out of the wandering in the wilderness, man. You got to overcome that journey. So the wilderness, again, journey is between salvation and the resurrection, that time period. And only Yahuwah knows how long you'll be wandering around in the wilderness. A lot of it depends on your attitude. And if you get the living out, if you don't, you're puffed up. You think you know more than the scriptures. They know it all. Grabbing a hold of every little word that comes out of somebody's mouth and trying to prove them wrong rather than listening, having ears to hear and eyes to see so that you can learn something and you can get out of your wilderness instead of spinning your wheels around in the sand, stuck somewhere out in the desert with no food, no water, because you won't listen. Look at Luke 12. Luke 12:29. I'll get back to some of the other stuff I told you I'd get back to. Don't worry. I spelled the title wrong. Let me pause here for a second and let you guys take in what we were just talking about. It's Lou saying I spelled something wrong here. Let me look. Check spelling on video title. Passover. Yeah. There you go. I guess I got it right. If not, I'll fix it when we get off. I'll look at it again when we get off. Is it right now? Or if not, then I'll fix it later. Let's get back to Luke 12:29-40. Luke 12:29-40 says, "And do not seek what you shall eat or what you shall drink, and do not keep worrying, for the nations of the world seek all these, and your Father knows that you need these. But seek the reign of Yahuwah, and all these shall be added to you. Do not fear, little flock, because your Father did delight to give you the rain. Sell your possessions and give in kindness. Make yourself purses which do not grow old, a treasure in Shemaim that does not fail, where no thief comes near nor moth destroys. For where your treasure is, therefore your heart shall be also. Let your loins be girded and your lamps burning, and be like men waiting for their master when he shall return from the wedding, that when he comes and knocks, they open to him immediately. Blessed are those servants who the master, when he comes, shall find them watching. Truly I say to you that he shall gird himself and make them sit down to eat, and shall come and serve them. And if he comes in the third watch, or in the second watch, or the third watch, and find them so, blessed are those servants." Wow. So be so attuned and keen to obeying Yahuwah and serving Yahuwah as you're walking through that wilderness. You're waiting on him. He comes and he finds you waiting on him. He'll get you out of there, out of that wilderness. We can look at it that way. Okay. Yeah. Let's take a look at Luke 24. Luke 24. Oh, I see what you're saying. I see what I did wrong. Hang on a minute. I'll put it up there. Oh. Leavened. There you go. I think I got it this time. Okay. There we go. Thanks for the correction. I guess I got it right now. Okay, so here we go. And so this is another, this is just another way of Luke is who is not a firsthand witness, but this is just his, after collecting all this information from other people, and he put this same story together that we just read in John 20. So this is Luke's version of it, based on collected information, not firsthand eyewitnessing it, okay, because he was not a first-hand eyewitness. So here we go. And on the first Yom of the week, at early dawn, they came to the tomb, bringing the spices which they had prepared, and they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. Let me see something here. Okay. And having entered, they did not find the body of the master Mashiach. The master Yahusha. And the body was gone. And it came to be, as they were perplexed about this, that see, 2 men stood by him in radiant garments, and becoming frightened and bowing their faces to the earth, these said to them, why do you seek the living among the dead? Okay. He is not here, but has been raised. So there's the resurrection, but not Bikurim yet. Okay, so that's not Bikurim yet. Bikurim is when he goes up and presents himself to Yahuwah as the sheaf, the waving of the sheaf offering. See that? So this is the resurrection, not Bikurim. He hasn't done that yet. At least we haven't read that he did that yet. Remember how he spoke to you when he was still in Galilee, saying the son of Adam has to be delivered into the hands of sinners and be staked, and on the third Yom rise again. And they remembered his words, and having returned from the tomb, they reported all this to the 11 and to all the rest. And it was Miriam from Magdala and Yacona and Miriam, the mother of Jacob, and the rest with them, who told this to the emissaries. And their words appeared to them to be nonsense, and they did not believe them. They didn't believe the women. But Peter arose and ran to the tomb, and stooping down, he saw the linen wrappings lying by themselves. And he went away home, marveling at what took place. And see, 2 of them were going that same Yom to a village called Emmaus, which was 12 kilometers from Jerusalem. And they were talking to each other of all this which had taken place, and it came to be, as they were talking and reasoning, that Yahushua himself drew near and went with him. But their eyes were restrained, so they did not know him. Interesting that they didn't know him, and that was his uncle and aunt, right? Perhaps he appeared as someone else and not himself. And he said to them, what are these words you are exchanging with each other as you are walking, and you are sad? And the one whose name was Cleophas, answering, said to him, are you the lone visitor in Jerusalem who does not know what took place in these days? And he said to them, what? And they said to him, concerning Yahushua of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before Elohim and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death and staked him, when, however, were expecting that it was he who was going to redeem Yisrael. He was going to fight their enemy, and he was going to release them from the Roman occupation, right? But besides all this, today is the third Yom since these things took place. But see, the third Yom. And he's walking with them now on the third Yom. Not the fourth, the third. But certain women of ours who arrived at the tomb early also astonished us when they did not find his body. They came saying that they had also seen a vision of messengers who said he was alive. 3 days had went past, and it was the fourth day. That's what I meant to say. And some of those with us went to the tomb and found it, as also the women had said, but they did not see him. And he said to them, thoughtless ones and slow of heart to believe in all that the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary for the Mashiach to suffer these and to enter into his esteem? And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he was explaining to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. So he was spent hours with them, opening up scriptures to them and teaching them. How lucky were they? Very lucky. And they approached the village where they were going, and he seemed to be going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, stay with us, for it is toward evening, and the Yom has declined. And he went in to stay with them. And it came to be, when he sat at the table with them, having taken the bread, he blessed, and having broken, he was given it to them. And their eyes were opened, and they recognized him. And he disappeared from their sight. So now he just vanishes. And they said to each other, was not our heart burning within us as he was speaking to us on the way, and as he was opening the scriptures to us? I bet it was. And rising up that same hour, they returned to Jerusalem and found the 11 and those who were with them gathered together, saying, the master was truly raised and has appeared to Simon. And they related what took place on the way and how he was recognized by them at the breaking of the bread. And as they were saying this, Yahushua himself stood in the midst of them and said to them, Shalom. And being startled and frightened, they thought they had seen a phantom. And he said to them, why are you troubled? And why do doubts arise in your heart? See my hands and my feet, that is I myself. Handle me and see, for the phantom does not have flesh and bones, as see I have. And saying this, he showed them his hands and his feet. And while they were still not believing for joy and marveling, he said to them, have you any food here? And they gave him a piece of broiled fish and some honeycomb. And taking it, he did eat it in their presence. And he said to them, these are the words which I spoke to you while I was still with you, that all have to be concluded that are written in the Torah of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms concerning me. Then he opened up their minds to understand the scriptures. And he said to them, thus it has been written, so it was necessary for the Mashiach to suffer and to rise again from the dead on the third Yom, and that repentance and forgiveness of sins should be proclaimed in his name to all nations, beginning at Jerusalem. And you are witnesses of these things, and see, I am sending the promise of my Father upon you, but you are to remain in the city of Jerusalem until you are clothed with power from on high, meaning the Ruach HaKodesh. And he led them out as far as Beth and Yah, and lifting up his hands, he blessed them. And it came to be, while he was blessing them, that he was parted from them and was taken up into the sky. And they, having bowed down to him, returned to Jerusalem with great joy, and were continually in the set-apart place, praising and blessing Elohim. So look over at Acts 1:5. It says, because Yehukanan truly immersed in water, but you shall be immersed in the Ruach HaKodesh not many days from now. So that's what he was talking about over here when he said in verse 49, stay in Jerusalem until you are clothed with the power from on high, immersed with the Ruach HaKodesh. Okay. So they returned with great joy. So let's look at X1 9 here. 9 through 12. And having said this, while they were looking on, he was taken up, and a cloud had hid him from their sight. And as they were gazing into the sky as he went up, see, two men stood by them dressed in white, who also said, Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking up into the sky? This same Yahusha who was taken up from you into the sky shall come in the same way as you saw him go into the sky. Then they went back to Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives, which is near Jerusalem, a Yom Shabbat's journey. So that tells us when he ascended back to the throne, it was from the Mount of Olives, not in a mountain up in Galilee, as stated in Matthew 28. A lot of denominations will teach you that that was the ascension back to the throne, and he gave them their great commission, and ascended back to the throne. And that's not the case at all. He gave them instructions every time he appeared to them, which he appeared to them quite a bit, because he was on the earth for 40 days after he was resurrected. He stayed on the earth for 40 days and appeared to them quite a bit, and then defied gravity and disappeared, and then came back to them somewhere else. Okay, and it wasn't just once. It was quite a few times, and he gave them instructions every time he talked to them. And so here we can see that he didn't give them a great commission and ascend back to the throne in Matthew 28. He just gave them further instructions, disappeared in the sky, defied gravity, and then appeared back to them another place in time. And so here we can see that when he finally did, after 40 days, ascend back to the throne in the Shemayim, to the right hand of the Father, then he was on the Mount of Olives, because they just walked back to Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives. It just told us that. So make sure that you correct that. That's a pretty heavy duty mistake people make. It's out there. And people hear it, they parrot it, and the truth never gets told. So let's see. I wanted to talk about something else there in Luke. What was it? Oh, okay. So all right, so he said that he would raise himself up on the third day. Okay, so look, I've talked about this quite a bit before, so I don't know why anybody hasn't heard this yet, but just in case you haven't, I'm going to repeat it. Yahusha died approximately 3 p.m. or the 9th hour. Okay, it stayed dark from the noon, 3rd hour, to the 9th hour, or wait a minute, from the 6th hour to the 9th hour. It stayed dark 3 hours. And then he died that 9th hour or 3 p.m. in our time. Okay. From that point, probably down to 6 p.m., that next 3 hours, before dark. So that's the time period they had, and the women were in a big frenzy, running around like little chickens with their heads cut off, trying to get people to take him down. And then this man comes up, and he goes to Pilate and says, "Give me the body. I have a tomb. and I'll bury him in my tomb. It was a tomb of a rich person. And so Pilate granted him that, and he went, and the Roman guards said, well, make sure he's dead first. And so they stuck him with that spear in the side. They didn't break his bones, because that would have been a violation of the Passover law, law of the Passover. So none of his bones were broken, but they did stick him in the side, and blood and water came out, and he shed his blood on the altar of the earth. And they took him down. They cleaned him up, wrapped him in linen, took him to the tomb, wrapped him with linen, put him in there, and rolled the stone back over there. Then they scurried away, cleaned themselves up, and got prepared for unleavened bread, of the Sabbath that was coming up as soon as it got dark. And so he was most definitely in the tomb, okay, before it got dark. So let's just say, save argument, there was 1 hour left in the day when they finally placed him in the tomb, and they rolled the stone over that tomb, opening of the tomb, and they were all able to scurry back, wash themselves, get cleaned up, and go home and get prepared to eat the Passover meal on the first day of unleavened bread when the sun went down. Okay. That means Yahusha was in that tomb prior to it being dark. And so that started the 3 day and 3 night count. And he said, I'll be in the belly of the whale, or the heart of the earth, for 3 days and 3 nights. All right. That started it, because I don't buy this last hour or half hour remaining in that day, okay, the Passover day, to count for 24-hour period. I don't buy into that. You can't sell me that. I don't buy into he died on Good Friday and was resurrected on Easter morning, and we're going to eat a Passover ham, not a Passover lamb, in order to celebrate it, his resurrection. I don't buy into that stuff. So instead of doing that and acting like we're little kids and we can't count, okay, we're going to go from the time that tomb was shut, and it was still daylight, at least an hour, maybe a half hour, but we'll say an hour of daylight starts the 3 day and 3 night count, which is a 72-hour full 72-hour period. No more and no less. Okay, so that comes up and ends 1 hour prior to the weekly Shabbat expiring. That's where that 72-hour period is. And there's still an hour, half hour, or an hour of daylight left. That completes that 72-hour prophecy. Stops right there. It doesn't go off into the first day. If it did, then that first day that would be the 4th night or the 4th day, however you want to count it. The 4th Yom, beginning of the 4th Yom. And he said, I'll raise my body on the 3rd Yom, which means you had to complete that 72-hour period exactly. And then there had to be a little bit of daylight left there for him to resurrect himself, remaining on the 3rd Yom, because that 72 hours fell on the 3rd Yom, right at the very end of it. So that would mean he resurrected himself pretty much exactly when that 72 hours expired, and it was still the Shabbat. You still had half hour to an hour left. And then it became dark, and that was the 4th Yom, or the first day of the week started. And then before daybreak, just before at daybreak or dawn, is when Magdalene went down there to the tomb and saw that his body was missing. The rock was moved. So when did he come out? Nobody really knows. Where'd he go? Between the time he resurrected himself and Magdalene went to the tomb and he saw her on the fourth day. Nobody really knows. It don't say. But I can highly probable that I would almost bet that Yahusha did not stay in that tomb, that grave, any longer than necessary, not 1 second more. As soon as the exactly 72-hour period expired, he resurrected his body. I don't think he laid there, oh, I'll just wait. It's been 72 hours, but I don't want to resurrect my body on the Shabbat. Let me see, I healed a lot of people on Shabbat. I even raised a dead man on Shabbat. I drove out demons on the Shabbat. I went and walked down and taught on the Shabbat. But I don't think I'm going to resurrect my body on the Shabbat. I'll wait at least another hour to do it. I'll stay dead for another hour. Or maybe I'll just stay dead for 12 more. I just don't feel like resurrecting my body until at dawn. I'll do it at dawn. I don't think so, man. I think he didn't stay dead for 1 more second than he had to. That's just my opinion. You got yours, I got mine. Okay, so very interesting, isn't it? All right, let's take a look now at, let's go to Matthew. Let's go to Matthew. Okay, so you can see now I'm getting back a little bit into, the more general understanding of Passover, which includes all 3 events: Passover, unleavened bread, and Bikurim, right? But I'm presenting some other things that people haven't really thought that much about. But what we were talking about with the spiritual journey into the wilderness between salvation, so other people understand what I'm talking about, and the resurrection, this is probably a new concept or a new thought process for a lot of us. But we really, really need to get a handle on that. Because if you don't, you're going to be wandering around in the wilderness. You ever see a map of where they suggest, or at least are guessing, the guesstimate of where the children of Israel went when they didn't go to the promised land because they disobeyed Yahuwah, and so he made them stay in the wilderness? Remember, it was a test. It's a test and trials to see where your heart is and to see if you're going to obey Yahuwah. Well, when they didn't obey him, they stayed in the wilderness. And not only did they stay in the wilderness, they continued to disobey him. They tried to obey him, but it was too late at a certain point. He just left them wandering in that wilderness until they died. They died there. See what I'm saying? And so it's because of the disobedience. So if you go through this, and they wandered like crazy all over the place, like in circles. They're wandering around and around and around like chickens with their head cut off. And it's ridiculous to see a map outlining their path and how they wandered around the wilderness for 40 years. Just amazing. But yet their shoes never wore out. Their clothes never had a hole in them, never wore out. Yahuwah was still there, taking care of them. And so if you stay disobedient and you don't understand, if you don't see the foreshadowing of what's taking place here and understand the example given to us, and you don't get that you're going through the wilderness journey of your life and all these things that happen to you are for a reason, and to see where your heart is, to see if you obey him, or will you curse him to his face and die. He wants to see what you'll do. If you're a believer, He's going to refine you and test you and put you on trial like that through the wandering wilderness journey of your life, man. You have to recognize it, man, to get out of it. Otherwise, you'll just wander around like they did in disobedience. A lot of us try to, act like we're obedient. I mean, we all make mistakes. There's no doubt we all have a daily battle with the flesh, with the world, and with Satan and his demons. Okay, but when you're doing it unintentionally and there's remorse and there's, you're not liking it and you're battling against it, that's a big difference than doing something because you want to do it and because you like it and because you're being stiff-necked and stubborn and disobedience, and then run back to church on Sunday and say, here I am, take my hair, I'll give you some money. I'll be forgiven. That's wandering in the wilderness. You got to recognize it, understand it, and he'll bring you out. He'll let you go into the promised land, which is the reign of Yahuwah. How bad do you want it? You like the life you got? He'll strike your body too. He'll make you ill. He'll even take you to the brink of death like he did Job, where you actually, you think it's better just to die because your life is so, it's gone to a point where you're not even enjoying it anymore. It's just constant pain and sorrow and hurting. And I mean, you can't even concentrate. You don't want to eat. You don't want to see anybody. You don't care what you look like. You're depressed, and he'll take you to that brink, man, to see where your heart is. What will you do if he takes you to that point? There comes a time in everybody's life where Yahuwah will take you to the brink of death. Sometimes 2 or 3, 4 times within a lifetime. He'll take you to that point to see what you'll do. It's all part of the wilderness journey, folks. Recognize it, and he'll bring you out, let you, and give you the resurrection. But you got to pass through the wilderness at least once, right? Didn't they pass through the wilderness, come up to the river, and were just about ready to cross over into the promised land? They were right there. They just need to go over, do what he said. And yet they disobeyed him right there. He turned them back and they go wander around in the wilderness for 40 years, man. Matter of fact, y'all are going to die in the wilderness. I'm done with you. They'll do the same in our life too. We have to recognize it, understand it, and get through that wilderness journey and achieve the resurrection, which you can achieve in this life. Like I said, look at Matthew 27. (27:45). And from the 6th hour there was darkness all over the land. Until the 9th hour. So the 6th hour would have been 12 p.m. and the 9th hour would have been 3 p.m. our time. So 3 hours. And about the 9th hour, Yahusha cried out with a loud voice, saying, Allah, Allah, Ali, Ali, Lama, Shabachthana. That is, my all, why have you forsaken me? Some of those standing there, having heard, said, this one calls Elijah. And immediately, where was I? And immediately one of them ran and took a sponge and filled it with sour wine and put it on a reed and gave it to him to drink. But the rest said, leave it, Let us see if Elijah comes to save him. And Yahusha cried out again with a loud voice and gave up his ruach. If we're wandering through the wilderness between Passover and the resurrection, through the salvation and the resurrection, and it represents the unleavened bread, what kind of person do you suppose we should become? Since the wilderness journey is represented by unleavened bread, we should become humble. You have to get rid of your arrogance, your ego, your pride, your wickedness, and you have to become a humble person. Walk in humility with Yahuwah through the desert with no food, no water, in a harsh place. That's what he's wanting you to do. That's what's going to lead you out of the wilderness. If you're puffed up, if you think you know everything, if you think you're better than anybody else, you put yourself above others, prideful, egomaniac, you think you're pious, more pious than anyone, more smarter than anyone, you're going to continue to wander in the wilderness of leavened bread. You have to become like unleavened bread in the wilderness. And that means you get rid of all that pride and ego and wickedness, and you become humble. Become a humble servant to Yahuwah and to others. Try that one time. Maybe you'll come out of the wilderness. Maybe he'll remove your affliction. Maybe he'll heal you. Maybe he'll bless you, give you blessings upon blessings like he did Job. Bring you out of there. Maybe you'll find yourself feeling young again. Humble yourself. Humiliate yourself to others. Put them first above yourself. And maybe you'll find your way out of the wilderness. And see, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And the arets was shaken, and the rocks were split. And the tombs were opened, and many bodies of the set-apart ones who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the set-apart city and appeared to many, which would have been Jerusalem. Now here, a lot of denominations say that these people were resurrected. The tombs were opened and they were resurrected. And that ain't what happened. The tombs were opened, but they weren't resurrected. It says, and coming out of the tombs after his resurrection. So after 3 days and 3 nights, when he was resurrected, then these people came up out of the tombs. So nobody could. Why? Because he was the firstborn of the resurrection. He was the first one to be resurrected. And when the captain and those with him who were guarding Yahusha saw the earthquake and all that took place, they feared exceedingly, saying, truly, this was the son of Elohim. And many women who followed, now it was dark between noon and 3 o'clock for 3 hours. That wasn't no normal eclipse. We all should know that, especially those who were in the line of totality in this past eclipse. That eclipse didn't last no 3 hours. It was total darkness, like nighttime for 3 hours. So that wasn't an eclipse that did that. That was Yahuwah doing that as a sign. And many women who followed Yahusha from Galilee, attending him, were there, watching from a distance, among whom were Miriam from Magdala and Miriam, the mother of Jacob, or Jacob, Jacob and Yusuf, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. Those would be the sons of thunder. And when evening came, there came a rich man from Ramathaim named Joseph, whom himself had also become a Talmud of Yahusha. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Yahusha. Then Pilate ordered the body to be granted. And having taken the body, Joseph wrapped it in clean linen and laid it in the new tomb which he had hewn out of a rock. And he rolled a large rock against the door of the tomb and went away. And Miriam from Magdala was there, and the other Miriam sitting opposite the tomb. On the next Yom, which was after the preparation day, which would have been the Shabbat, the first day of unleavened bread, according to Matthew here. On the next Yom, which was after preparation, that is Passover. Would have been the first day of unleavened bread, man. The chief priest and Prusim gathered together to Pilate, saying, Master, we remember while he was still alive how that deceiver said, after 3 Yamim I am raised. Order then that the tomb be guarded until the 3rd Yom, lest his Talmudim came by night and steal him away, and should say to the people, he was raised from the dead, and the last deception shall be worse than the first. So Pilate said to them, you have a watch, go guard it as you know how. And they went and guarded the tomb, sealing the stone and setting the watch. Okay. So very interestingly here, that this all happened the first day of unleavened bread. I don't see any violations here. I mean, all they really did was come and tell that Pilate to put a guard. They wanted guards stationed at the grave, so there was no deception because of the expectation of the resurrection of his body after 3 days. Even though the way this is worded, this happened on the Shabbat. And so they went and they guarded the tomb, they sealed it, and was setting the watch. Which is kind of strange. If they were getting paid to do that and everything, they were working on the high Shabbat, So it makes you kind of scratch your head until you realize, oh, these were Romans. These weren't Hebrews guarding this. These were Roman soldiers, okay, that were assigned to these Prusim, okay. And so anyway, moving on then to Matthew 28, we get a little bit of some eyesight here. It says, now after the Shabbat, now this isn't talking about the first day of unleavened bread here. This is talking about the weekly Shabbat now. So now after the Shabbat, or the weekly Shabbat, the normal Shabbat, the 7th day Sabbath, okay? Let me just pause here just for a second. And I think most of us know this, but in case you don't, on the year that Yahusha was the Passover lamb, that Passover fell on the 4th day of the week that year. And so the 5th day of the week would have been unleavened bread. He was placed in the tomb on the end of the 4th day while it was still daylight. Okay. And then he went through, he was the Passover lamb, and because they ate the meal on the 5th, at the beginning of the 5th day when it got dark. They ate the Passover meal while he was still in the grave. He was in the grave by then, okay, because he was the Passover lamb. He did not eat the Passover meal. So then he was in there for the 5th day and the 6th day, 3 nights, 3 days, 3 nights. And then he resurrected himself exactly in 72-hour period, which would have been at the end of the Shabbat, the weekly Shabbat. This is what this is starting to talk about right now. So now after the Shabbat, toward dawn, so that would have been after Shabbat ended, it got dark up to midnight. He was already resurrected. And up to midnight, and then down almost at daybreak before dawn, when you could see daylight in the horizon, but you couldn't see the tip of the sun had not come up above the horizon yet. You could just see the light starting to appear on the horizon, not the sun itself. But you've been on the first day of the week. Okay. And so toward dawn on the first day of the Shabuah, or week, Miriam from Magdalene and the other Miriam came to see the tomb. And see, there was a great earthquake, for a messenger of Yahuwah came down. Okay, so this would have been, he was resurrected, but he didn't wave himself in front of Yahuwah yet. So he didn't do the wave offering yet. He probably did the wave offering after Miriam seeing him somewhere in that time period, maybe just a little bit later. I wouldn't say went beyond 9 a.m., when he became the wave sheaf offering, okay? The resurrection came before that. See what I mean? So he didn't resurrect and go straight up there and become the wave offering. Why? Probably because it wasn't even Bikurim yet. The 72-hour period ended about an hour before dark on the Shabbat. See what I mean? So it wasn't even, legally, it wasn't even Bikurim yet. So you didn't go straight up there and do that. And see, there was a great earthquake, for the messenger came out of heaven and came and rolled the stone from the door and sat on it. And his appearance was like lightning. And so he glowed white. And his garments as white as snow. And the guards trembled for fear of him, became like dead men. They probably passed out. And the messenger responding said to the women, "Do not fear, for I know that you seek Yahusha who was staked. He is not here, for he was raised," resurrection, as he said, "Come, see the place where the master lay." Now, Bikurim represents the resurrection, but see, he didn't do the waving of the sheaf ceremony yet, but he was resurrected. He was alive on Bikurim. See what I'm saying? That's why I used to say that he didn't come back alive till after sundown in the fourth day began, the fourth yom began, because he was the resurrection, and Bikurim represents the resurrection, right? But when we analyze it and look a little bit harder at it, it would make sense that he stayed in that tomb longer, and even the second longer than he had to. But since Bikurim is really the sheaf waving of the barley, then that didn't happen till later, and when it became daylight, And I think may be mistaken on this, but it's in my mind somewhere where I'd read the priest waved that sheaf offering and Bikurim about 9 o'clock in the morning after daybreak. I'm not positive of that. It's in my mind for some reason. But anyway, he was resurrected, as he said. Come see the place where the master lay. And go quickly, say to the Talmud that he was raised from the dead, and see, he is going before you to Galilee. There you shall see him. See, I have told you. And so he told him that after his resurrection, he would meet them on a certain mountain up in Galilee. Okay. And that's what we read about in Matthew 28. That's where he's at. And they say he gives the Great Commission, and then he ascended to the throne. They were on a mountain in Galilee. And it was clear, we read back in Acts 1, that he ascended back to the throne from the Mount of Olives, not from a mountain in Galilee. See, so they're wrong on that. So don't parrot that and teach that, correct it and teach it right. And they left the tomb quickly in fear with fear and great joy, and ran to report to his talmidim. And as they were going to report to his talmidim, see, Yahusha met them, saying, "Greetings." And they came and held him by the feet and did bow to him. See that? There it is. That's what I was talking about. So as they were going to report to the talmidim, see, Yahusha met them, saying, "Greetings." And they came and held him by the feet and did bow to him. Then Yahusha said to them, "Do not fear. Go report to my brothers to go to Galilee, and they shall see me there." So we read earlier that he told her, "Don't touch me. I have not ascended to my Father yet." But here in Matthew's account, they ran up to him and held him by his feet, which means they were touching him, and did bow down to him. So how can that be? One account says, he said, "Do not touch me. I have not ascended to my Father yet." In other words, I have not went up and became the sheaf wave offering yet, and have not sprinkled the original set apart places, or the Holy of Holies in the Shemaim yet. So don't touch me. I haven't presented myself as first fruits to the Father yet. But here it's saying that they ran up to him, fell down to his feet, and was holding him by his feet and bowing down to him. They were touching him. So why? And that's what I'm saying. We can't shortchange Yahuwah. We don't know the answer to this. Some people say, "Oh, there's an error there, or it's a contradiction," and whatever. Some say, "Well, Matthew was the eyewitness, perhaps, and Luke wasn't," but that's not true either, because the sheep they slaughtered, they killed the shepherd, and the sheep scattered, and so Matthew was hiding somewhere. Probably wasn't even around. Doesn't even mention him ever. It talks about Peter and the pupil whom Yahushua, the other pupil, and Mary and a bunch of women. But it never really mentions Matthew until he shows up in the upper chamber behind locked doors. That's where Matthew comes in the scene at. So he couldn't have been eyewitness to this. Highly unlikely. He wrote what he was told by others. So that brings me to, like I said earlier, Yahuwah could have stopped time, man. He could have made everything just freeze while he went up and did what he needed to do. And then he came back and unfroze time, and they ran over and grabbed his feet, and he went up and did his thing while time was frozen. We dare say that he couldn't do that? I'm not going to say he couldn't do that. And probably could think about 10 other things that maybe he could have done. In order for this to make sense, but he could have, between the time that she came up and said, "Don't touch," and he said, "Don't touch me," and she left, he could have went up, did his thing, came back down, and then when she come back is when she fell down at his feet. But it doesn't really say that. I'm just saying we can come up with probably 10 different scenarios to figure this one out. But I just want you to see that, because a lot of people, denominations and atheists and so forth, people are anti scriptures, trying to prove scriptures untrue, will point to these verses, and say, how is it that he told her, "Do not touch me, I'm not ascended yet," And this one here that says that they as soon as he said greetings, and they were going to report to his talmudim, he met them to tell him that he was missing. He said greetings, and they came and held him by the feet and bowed to him. See, it doesn't even mention that Mary didn't recognize him either. It's almost like a totally different aspect here. See what I'm saying? So you need to read this and come to some kind of understanding on your own about this, where it makes sense to you. But I just say, everything's possible with Yahuwah, and so we can't leave anything out of the equation when we're trying to figure out Yahuwah. What happened? Just because it doesn't tell us exactly, or there's some type of difference, we can't take that as literal and say, yeah, you're right, there's something wrong here. Because it could be way beyond anything we could even imagine or understand. All right. So I hope y'all picking up what I'm laying down on that. Shouldn't have probably even mentioned it to you, but you need to know it, and because it's going to come to you. People are going to confront you with that. The more that you witness and give testimony, the more you're going to come up against things like this. Okay. Okay, so, and while they were going, see, some of the watch, having gone into the city, reported to the chief priests all that took place. These were the Roman soldiers that were guarding the tomb. And when they came together with the elders and taking counsel, they gave enough silver to the soldiers, saying, say that his talmudim came at night and stowed him away while we slept. And if this should be reported to the governor, we shall win him over and keep you out of trouble. And having taken the silver, they did as they were instructed. And this account was widely spread among the Yehudim to this yom. And the 11 talmudim went away into Galilee, to the mountain which Yahusha had appointed for them. So he had told them where to meet him after his resurrection. And it was up in Galilee, at a mountain in Galilee. That was just one of the places he appeared to them and gave them instructions. And then the defied gravity went up into the clouds and disappeared. But then he appeared to them somewhere else quite a few times. Remember, he never ascended back to the throne for 40 days after he resurrected. So he appeared back to him a lot of times, not just once, like certain denominations try to suggest. So they went up there to the mountain which Yahusha had appointed for them. And when they saw him, they bowed to him, but some doubted. Some doubted. Well, some of them 11 doubted that it was him. That's crazy that they were still doubting. Why? Well, because they were still in the mind of the flesh. They had not received the immersion of the Ruach HaKodesh yet. He had not opened their minds to fully understand scriptures or about him in the Tanakh. And Yahusha came up and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on the earth. Therefore, go and make talmudim of all the nations, immersing them in the name, which is singular, of the Father and of the Son and of the Ruach HaKodesh, which are three roles Yahuwah plays in his redemption plan. He plays the Father, the Son, and the Ruach HaKodesh, and all three of them have one name, and it's Yahusha. Therefore, go and make the talmudim of all the nations, immersing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Ruach HaKodesh. That means there's only one name. It's singular. Teaching them to guard all that I have commanded you, which would be obedience, and the Basora, and the appointed times. And see, I am with you always, even through your journey through the wilderness. He's with you. Don't ever forget that. Is no matter how bad it gets, how much pain you're in, how much your life is falling apart in the wilderness, remember, he's with you always until the end of the age. Amen. Okay. So certain denominations teach that this was the big commission given to his 11 students, Talmudim, and afterwards he ascended back to the right hand of the Father, back into the heaven, to the throne, ascended back, sat back down on the throne. No, he did not. This is just one time that he appeared to them after his resurrection and gave them instructions, disappeared, and then he appeared to him somewhere else. Matter of fact, I'll go as far as saying he did this up here on a mountain in Galilee before the outpouring of the Ruach HaKodesh at Pentecost. Which would make perfect sense, right? Yeah, because he'd have to ascend back to the throne before he could come back as the Ruach HaKodesh and immerse people with the Ruach. See that? So it just common sense. All right, go to Mark 15:33. Mark 33, starting there down to the end of that 15th chapter. And when the 6th hour came, now this is Mark, his explanation of this, just so we can do a little bit of comparing. And when the 6th hour came, which would have been 12 p.m., our time, darkness came over the land until the 9th hour, which would have been about 3 p.m., our time. And at the 9th hour, Yahusha cried out with a loud voice, saying, Ali, Ali, lama sabachthani, which is translated, my all, why have you forsaken me? And some of those standing by, when they heard it, said, see, he is calling for Elijah, or Eliyahu. And someone ran and filled a sponge with sour wine and put it on a reed and offered it to him to drink, saying, leave him. Let us see if Eliyahu comes to take him down. And Yahusha cried out with a loud voice and breathed his last. And the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the captain who was standing opposite him saw that he cried out like this and breathed his last, he said, truly this man was the son of Elohim. And there were only women watching from a distance, among whom was also Miriam of Magdala and Miriam, the mother of Jacob, the less, and of Joseph and Shalom, and also followed him and attended him when he was in Galilee, and many other women who came up with him to Jerusalem. And when evening had come, because it was the preparation Yom, that is the Yom before the Shabbat, this would have been the first day of unleavened bread here. So when evening had come, because it was preparation Yom, the Passover, that is the Yom before the Shabbat, or before the first day of unleavened bread. Joseph of Yam Thamayam, a prominent council member who was himself waiting for the reign of Yahuwah, came. Boldly went into Pilate and requested the body of Yahusha. But Pilate wondered whether he was already dead. So summoning the captain, he asked him if he was already dead. And when he learned from the captain, he gave the body to Joseph. And he said, having bought fine linen, took him down. And he, having bought fine linen, took him down and wrapped him in the linen And he laid him in a tomb which had been hewn out of the rock, and rolled a stone against the entrance of the tomb. And Miriam from Magdala and Miriam, the mother of Joseph, saw where he was laid. All right. So we can see this is the same event, same story, just from a different witness or different writer. Now, Mark was not an eyewitness to this. We don't know for sure. He may have been a young kid standing there or something. But as far as we know, he wasn't an eyewitness to this. And after the Shabbat, which would have been the first day of unleavened bread, not the weekly Shabbat, but the first day of unleavened bread, Miriam from Magdala and Miriam, the mother of Jacob, and Shalomah bought spices to go and anoint him. So they wanted to go back and anoint him with spices. So obviously then they had enough daylight to clean him up, wrap him up in linen, and lay him in the tomb and roll a stone over. But they were running out of time, so they couldn't do the proper burial procedure that they would normally do. So they planned on going back with spices and doing it right, finishing what they should have done for a proper burial. See what I mean? That's why they wanted to go. They were short of time. They had to hurry. And very early on the first day of the Shabbats, they came to the tomb at the sunrise. And they said among themselves, "Who shall roll away the stone from the entrance of the tomb for us?" And looking up, they saw that the stone had been rolled away, for it was extremely large. So how could this be? The very early on the first of the Shabbats, they came to the tomb at the sunrise. So that would have been Bikurim, right? And they saw that the stone had already rolled away, for it was extremely large. Okay. So, and having entered into the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right wearing a white robe, and they were greatly amazed. And he said to them, "Do not be much astonished. You seek Yahusha of Nazareth, who was staked. He was raised. He is not here." So here we go again now. "See the place where they laid him, and go. Say to the Talmud and Kepha that he is going before you into Galilee, and shall see him there as he said to you." So see here, we find out he did give them instructions to meet him on a mountain in Galilee after his resurrection. Okay. And so that was like right after his resurrection. So it was way before his ascension, because that didn't happen until 40 days later. He was still on the earth for 40 days after his resurrection. See that now? So there's no way he ascended to the throne on that mountain in Galilee when he gave them instructions in Matthew 28. That's falsehood, man. Falsehood. See the place where they laid him, and go to his Talmud and Kepha, and he's going into Galilee, and you shall see him as he said to you. See that? And they went out and ran from the tomb, and were trembling and bewildered, and they spoke to no one, for they were fearful. They spoke to no one? They were fearful? And resurrecting earlier on the first of the Shabbats, see that? He resurrecting earlier on the first of the Shabbats. He appeared initially to Miriam from Magdalene, from whom he had cast out 7 demons. So that's saying that he resurrected on a Shabbat, the first of the Shabbat. He appeared initially to Miriam from Magdalene, from whom he had cast out 7 demons. So Bikurim, the first day of the week, would have been the beginning of the count of 7 Shabbats. See what I mean? And so it couldn't have been 7 days later as being counted as the first of the Shabbats. So it had to be the Shabbat prior to Bikurim that he's talking about here. It's kind of weird how he worded it, but this has to be the first day. The Bikurim was the first day of the first week, and countdown to Shavuot. Shavuot, 7 times 7 Shabbats. See what I'm saying? So it couldn't have been that 7 days later. He would have been in the tomb for 10 days if that was the case, and we know he wasn't. See what I'm saying? So it has to be the Shabbat prior to Bikurim, and so he was resurrected on that first Shabbat, just prior to the first day of the week coming, man, before the sun went down. That's what I think this is saying. It's just, he's just saying it in a weird way. Maybe that's how they talked back then. I don't know. So she went and reported to those who had been with him, mourning and weeping. And when they heard that he was alive and had been seen by her, they did not believe. They didn't believe her. And after this, he appeared in another form. So he was a shapeshifter. In another form? To 2 of them as they walked and traveled to the village. Now, here's the account of his uncle and aunt again, which would have known him as a child as he grew up all his life. And they couldn't recognize him. So he must, in another form, then he must have appeared to them as a totally different looking person, maybe a younger man, an older man, maybe a woman, a kid, who knows? It doesn't really say why they didn't recognize him, but here it says he in another form. He appeared in another form. So it couldn't, it could have been a middle-aged man that just looked differently, you know what I'm saying? But obviously it wasn't in his original appearance that they could recognize. So this, no doubt, he's a shapeshifter. He could defy gravity. He could walk through walls, do all kinds of things, disappear and reappear. And they went and reported it to the rest, but they did not believe them either. Later, he appeared to the 11 as they sat at the table, and he reproached their unbelief and hardness of heart, because they did not believe those who had seen him after he was raised. This is what I call the Bigfoot scenario. Okay, whether you believe in Bigfoot or if you don't is not the point here. I'm going to use it as an example. Okay, so there's 10,000 people of all different occupations, men, women, ages, kids, old people, all different nationalities, different ethnic races, religions, whatever, that have seen Bigfoot. But one person that hasn't seen Bigfoot says he's not real, and every single one of you people, all 10,000 of you people, I don't care if you're police, if you're a doctor, if you're a lawyer, if you're a priest, if you're a child, I don't care who you are. You're liars. All 10,000 of you are liars because I have not seen it. So that makes you a liar. You're all big fat liars because I have not seen it. It's all about me. I. Did I tell you about me? Did I tell you I didn't see it, so you're all a bunch of fat liars? It's all about me, man. I got to see it. Then it's true. But if I don't see it, you're all a bunch of big fat liars. Bigfoot scenario, man. Whether you believe in Bigfoot or if you don't, man, I'm not going to go up against 10,000 eyewitnesses that says they've seen them and call every single one of them a liar because I haven't seen it. I'll say, well, I'll just stay in reserve, man. If I see it, then I'll be one of you. Until then, I'll stay in reserve because it's hard for me to believe all 10,000 of you are lying. You know, that'd be a pretty big conspiracy, right? That'd be a huge conspiracy without many witnesses. So I call that the Bigfoot scenario. It don't matter if you believe in Bigfoot or not. That's not the point I'm making here. The point I'm making here is these 11 didn't believe the women when they said, we saw him, you know. And then so Yahusha scolds them, man. He reproaches their unbelief and hardness of heart because they did not believe those who had seen him after he was raised. He chose them specifically to see him first and to go tell his friends and his Talmudim that he had been risen. And they didn't believe who he chose as an eyewitness and an emissary to go deliver that message. He wasn't happy about that. That's the point. And he said to them, go into all the world and proclaim the Basora to every creature. Well, every creature would include animals, trees, insects, birds, plants, whatever you want to put on there. But every creature, definitely including animals, man, things that breathe oxygen. He who has believed and has been immersed shall be delivered. Believe in what? That he was resurrected, that he shed his blood, believe in the power of the blood of Yahusha to take away their sins. Okay. The rebirth process, and be immersed with the water and the Ruach shall be delivered. But he who has not believed in the blood of the Lamb of Yahuwah, the power of the blood of the Lamb of Yahuwah, the miraculous power of the blood of Yahusha, the Lamb of Yahuwah, shall be condemned. Condemned to the lake of fire, the second death, where there will be weeping and gnashing of the teeth, folks. And these signs shall accompany the ones who believe. In my name they shall cast out demons, and they shall speak with new tongues. They shall take away serpents, and if they drink any deadly poison, it shall be no means hurt them. They shall lay hands on the sick, and they shall get well. Then indeed, after the master had spoken to them, oh, that was Yahusha saying that stuff. Ooh, maybe I better believe it, huh? Maybe you better believe it. Since it was Yahusha saying them words. Then indeed, after the master had spoken to them, he was received up into the heaven and sat down at the right hand of Yahuwah. Now, that's the only place you're going to find, or at least that I can find, where it actually says, after that message, after those instructions, he actually ascended into the Shemaim and sat back down on his throne. All the other times he reappeared to them somewhere else and gave them further instructions. And they went out and proclaimed it everywhere while the master worked with them through the Paralika, the Comforter, the Ruach HaKodesh, Paracleta. And they went out and proclaimed it everywhere while the master worked with them and confirmed the word through the accompanying signs that Yahusha had given instructions on up here in 17 and 18. Amen. So cast out demons, speak in tongues, take away serpents, drink deadly poison, lay hands on the sick, healing, are all part of these according to Yahusha. You know. Very interesting. Okay. All right. So, we at? All right. So now let's just talk just a little bit here now. So now we see that as we progress through this festival of unleavened bread, that we only have a few days left. It ends on the second day of the week at evening, coming up. And Bikurim, first fruits, is on the first day of this week coming up. And so we're getting, and of course, this is the weekly Shabbat. And so it's a good time, really, to kind of reflect on all this, and maybe rewatch this, maybe do some of your own studying, and understand that, yes, these things have a literal meaning or a foreshadowing implications or a type of what's coming, but the spiritual, the reality of what all these things mean can pertain to our life right now, and also in the eternal reign, because these things are forever. Okay, so there has to be some kind of implementation in the eternal reign attached to these appointed times. See that? So this is a good time to reflect on all that and to understand the Passover or salvation is the beginning point, and the resurrection is the ending point, because that gives us eternal life. And then between that, then we have the wandering in the wilderness, which is represented by the unleavened bread. Okay. And so during our wandering journey through the wilderness, then what does that mean? That means, since it's represented by unleavened bread, then we need to get the ego out, our pride, the wickedness, all that out of us until we become humble servants and we walk in humility with Yahuwah, serving him and others and not ourselves. And once we can obtain that status or get to that point, then we have come out of the wilderness journey in our life, okay, within our life. And we're all on that journey. Okay, so that's how that all relates. Passover, salvation, the beginning, if you will, for believers. And then the unleavened bread, which is sanctification or the set-apartness, is where we're set apart at through our journey of unleavened bread or through the wilderness. And so we can remove the leaven, the sin, the lies, the wickedness, all that, and our egos, our pride, wickedness, all that, and then that's all in that walk through that wilderness is all between the Passover, the salvation, and the first fruits or the resurrection, which is the end of our journey. And we go into eternal life. After that, it's eternity, man. Once we're resurrected, we were there. We've made it to the final destination, the reign of Yahuwah, the promised land. We got to cross over and become Hebrew. You see it? I hope you see it. Okay. All right. So there you go. I hope you guys all learned, you got enough out of that, as much out of it as I did. I gained quite a bit of knowledge out of this evening's study. And don't forget, continue not to eat. You can't eat bread with leaven in it until the evening on the second day coming up. You got to remain steadfast on that. And if you're going to eat bread, it's got to be unleavened bread. Okay. So don't make any mistakes. Don't order pizza. None of that kind of stuff. That's one, a lot of people make that mistake. They order pizza, and that's got leaven in it. And it raises, that dough raises up when they cook it. Okay. And you got Bikurim coming up. That's for the resurrection. And so we want to think real hard on that and continue on until we get done with this appointed time. And then, from there, then you got the countdown, 7 Shabbats, 49 days. And then the following day after that Shabbat then would be the first day of the week. That would be Shabuath, or the wedding feast, the wedding ceremony, the outpouring of the Ruach HaKodesh in the upper chamber on the 120. And all 4 of these have been fulfilled already by Yahusha. So Passover, unleavened bread, Bikurim, and Shabuat have all been fulfilled already by Yahusha. Precisely and accurately. Exactly the time that they were supposed to be fulfilled, he fulfilled them. And he did all that during his first coming. Right? And so the next set of appointed times that will be coming up after Shabuath, what they call the winter feast, or appointed times, or the fall. And those have not been fulfilled yet. So they're still active prophecy there. They're still waiting to be fulfilled. And there's no reason to doubt that Yahusha will not fill those 3 winter appointed times precisely and accurately, like he did the first 4 in his first coming. So you probably have guessed it. Those 3 that are remaining unfulfilled prophecies, those 3 appointed times in the fall, will be fulfilled at his second coming. I'll repeat that. They will be fulfilled at his second coming. Trumpets, Day of Atonement, and Tabernacles will all be fulfilled at his second coming. And we'll talk about that when the appropriate time comes. So literally, Passover was the slain, the sacrifice of the Lamb of Yahuwah. He shed his blood for the forgiveness of sins. Unleavened bread represents his body lying in the tomb, pierced, bruised, and innocent, no sin in it. The yeast leaven would be representing sin, and he had no sin, and that's why it remains flat He wasn't puffed up. He wasn't an egomaniac. He was humble and humbled himself even to death, to the stake. He remained silent and humbled. He didn't have to. He could have just went nuts and killed everybody, saved himself, but he didn't. So he remained humble and all the way to the stake. And he had no sin. He had no leaven. So that unleavened bread represents his body. It can represent our new body too, with no leaven. And then Bikurim, or first fruits, represents the resurrection and the waving of the first fruits, which is Yahusha, the first fruits to Yahuwah of the dead, which paved the way for us to be resurrected. So the resurrection is extremely important. That's what actually gives us eternal life, is his resurrection. So since he defeated sin and death and was raised back up with eternal life, we can get that too. And so it's an extremely important event, the resurrection. But we couldn't get that far without the shedding of his blood, because without the shedding of blood, there's no forgiveness. And don't forget that walk in the wilderness, man. That's what that 7 days of unleavened bread's representing. Don't walk around in circles and die in the wilderness, folks. Get rid of the leaven, the sin, the ego, the pride, the wickedness, and clean yourself up and become humble before Yahuwah and others. Walk in humility with Yahuwah, and he'll bring you out of that wilderness. He won't leave you there to die, but it's up to you as far as obedience, as far as being obedient to Yahuwah and doing what he says through that trial and that test. You got to do what he says. If not, he'll leave you wandering around in that wilderness, even to death if he has to. And that ain't a place we want to be. Only 2 got to cross over out of that original group. Joshua and Caleb. All righty. All right. Now, don't forget about tomorrow. We have our sister Phyllis back with us tomorrow, Yahuwah willing. And she's always fun to join in to our assembly with. And she adds a nice taste to the meeting, and she keeps us all under control. And so we're so glad to have her back. Very lovely woman. And Brother Lou, he's always there keeping an eye on us as well. And we just love the Nazarene and our family. And we welcome every single one of you to join us as we assemble in obedience to Yahuwah on the Shabbat. And we call it the Nazarene Assembly. And it's a scriptural study group. So if you ever complain about, I'm lonely, it's lonely being Nazarene, where can I go? Where is there a group in my area? And all this and that. Well, here's your chance. Come and join us. You're all welcome to be there. No one's any more important than the other person. We're all equal in the body. We only have one head, one teacher, and that's Yahusha. And he does a whole lot of teaching. A whole lot of teaching on these scriptural study groups on the Shabbat. And it's right here on this same channel you're on now, Sparking You is Yah. And it starts at 12 p.m., straight up noon, Eastern Standard Time. It'll be 11 o'clock at Texas time. That's where I'm at. And we're in the book of Luke. And it's a really, really, really great chapter. I highly recommend that you don't miss this one. So be there or be square. And remember to stay in love with Yahusha. So long, Nazarene, beloved of Yahuwah. So long, everybody. See you next week. Same time, same place. Peace, joy, and love to everybody. So long, folks.